Hi everyone. Well, welcome to our next mini lecture. And today we're going to talk about the nation state and nations and states and countries and what are the differences between all of those. So I think we need to start by thinking about what is a nation, what is a nation state. You know, some of you even may think about nations such as the um, the Red Sox nation, right? There's some kind of a shared culture or shared interest to that group that we call a nation. But in international politics, more specifically, when we talk about nations, we talk about those groups that have shared demographics and some kind of culture that is connected and linked between all the people that are part of that nation, of that group. So if we think about demographics, it could, many times it does include at least one language that everybody speaks. So everybody in France speak French. They may speak other languages as well, but they all speak French. And everybody in England talk English. Again, they could speak other languages as well, but in general, they all speak English, at least that one joint language. Sometimes people who are part of the same nations have the same race in common, but we do have a lot of multi-ethnic and multiracial nation states as well. And that's also true for religion. While there are some countries that have a majority religion or a religion that the majority of people identify with, we also have other countries that have a more diverse community where many people from different religions or racial or ethnic groups still are part of that nation. And when we think about culture, this is not just about religion or race or ethnicity. It's also about the history of that nation state. Did they engage in any wars? Was there a war of independence? What is the flag or flags or the songs that they all stand up for? What are the holidays that they all celebrate? If we think about the United States, for example, you know, the 4th of July is a holiday that all of us who live in the United States celebrate, regardless of the religion or ethnic group that we are part of. And then, if nothing else, then there is the question of identity here. That if you are part of a nation, then you are part of the in-group. And those who are not part of that nation are part of the out-group. And so there is a little bit of us and them. And that, again, is not to say that a nation or a nation state is always homogeneous in any way and in any aspect. Many times it's not. However, there is some national identity that gets us all together. We are all living in the United States, part of the US community, US citizens, or some other sort of legal residents here. A lot of time we see groups talk about this idea of self-determination. Groups would like to have to be defined as a nation or as a country, as a nation state, and they want to have that ability to exclude others and to create the in-group, out-group situation. And when we're talking about nation states, and a lot of time when you read in our textbook or when you hear me talking, I may say nation state, I may just say a state, but unless I specifically say that I'm talking about the different US state. When I say state, I mean a country, a nation state. And a nation state has some ingredients. It has to have a territory, it has to have a population living in that territory, and it has to have a government or some kind of a political organization that governs that territory and those people. Now, here we can think about any of the 193 UN member states, member countries: Australia, Malaysia, Vietnam, France, Germany, the United States of America, Canada, Brazil, Bolivia, so on and so forth, right? But there are also some areas, territories, or cases where it is not as clear. And so if we look at Afghanistan, for example, it has a territory and the population, but the government is not entirely stable and not entirely in control of the whole territory. We still consider it as a nation state, but there are more cases like Afghanistan of countries, of states that are not necessarily completely consolidated, or at least not at this moment. When we talk about nation states, a lot of time we also talk about nationalism, and your book has been thinking about it, has been discussing this term a little bit more in depth. And the idea here is that, again, regardless of our religion, our ethnic group, our racial origin, we are all part of a nation. And when needed, we will stand up and protect that nation. This becomes an important part of our own identity. Historically, we can start talking about nation states in 1648. Before that, we were talking about small kingdoms. Before that, there was the age of the empires. But in 1648, with the Peace of Westphalia, we see the creation of those political units that have clear borders and are now not necessarily belonging to one person or to a king, but it's more of a political arrangement with a population and a territory that that all combine to create this entity, which with history becomes one of the most important in international politics, if not the most important. When we talk about nation states, we have to think about sovereignty. Sovereignty is this idea that the government or the people who live inside that territory and the government that governs them have the ultimate control over the territory and the population. Sovereignty usually comes with this coupled idea of non-intervention. And so in the United States, the US federal government has the ultimate authority over the territory and the people living in the United States. No other entity, no other external or international entity should be able to come in and tell us how to govern our own population or our own territory. Now, this has of course have been evolving and changing, and we will talk in what ways as the semester goes on. I said that a country, nation state, has a territory, and the territory has borders, has boundaries. Sometimes those are easy to see. If you have an ocean, that's a natural boundary that is not likely to change rapidly. But borders between countries that are on land could change. And they could change through negotiations, they could change through agreements, or they could change through war and victories and occupation. And we see all of those processes going around. The population of a country, it's helpful if that population wants to be part of that country. If the government has the loyalty of the population, if people are willing to support the system, even if they don't necessarily agree politically with whomever is in control at the moment, they still should be supporting the system, should be supporting the institutions. And we should have some sort of government institutions. They don't always look alike. They're not all the same. If you look between countries, government agencies and institutions in the United States are certainly not the same as the ones in France or Vietnam. And that's okay. But as long as there is some sort of an internal organization, it still is considered to be a nation state. And a country also needs diplomatic recognition. We also need the recognition from other countries, kind of putting a stamp, an international stamp, that we are part of the international community and everybody believe in our right for sovereignty and therefore non-intervention from external actors. Roughly speaking, most countries in the world have either some sort of a democratic government with elections and with participations from the public, or some sort of an authoritarian government. Not all authoritarian governments are malicious, but a lot of them do have more restrictions on the public and what the public can and cannot do in that country. Now, since this is a class about international politics, we are not going to go in and study each and every form of electoral system or different forms of government. That is, if you are interested in that line, you should take POL260, which is comparative politics. This is where you learn about the different types of governments around the world. We are, however, are thinking about how those different countries interact with each other and with other actors such as international organizations. If we're thinking about regime types and democracies, where, like I said, can either talk about countries that are some sort of a democracy or countries that are some sort of an authoritarian regime. And here's a map that provides giving you a look on where are the authoritarian regimes located around the world. This is the countries that are more democratic have the lighter colors, the lighter shades, and when you get into the purples, pinks, purples, and dark purple, this is where you find countries that are less democratic. So you can take a look about this map and maybe come up with some ideas or questions or thoughts about the world. Now, the fact that two countries are democratic or not doesn't per se say anything about the relationship between them. Two countries can be a democracy and an authoritarian government, like Saudi Arabia over here and the United States over here, but still be friendly and have economic ties, diplomatic ties, and otherwise be in good relations with each other. Now, we also have to consider that this system is dynamic. A country's governments can change. We can still have a government, a population, and a territory, meaning this is still a nation state, but the internal organization and the internal support of the population can change. And if it does, and if it weakens, then we get to the territory of weak states or even failed states. Weak states are those states that one of the three ingredients, or one of the five ingredients, if we include diplomatic recognition and internal support, is weakened or is gone altogether. And the example that the book is giving of Taiwan, this is a country with a stable government, a good economy, and a population that's mostly support the government. However, it does not have international recognition because most of the countries in the world recognize Taiwan, or at least recognize the claim of China that Taiwan is part of one China rather than an independent country. And so Taiwan in that way is a weak state, right? Also, we have the category of failed states, and this is where one of those five factors is completely lost. And here we are thinking about what if another country occupies you losing your territory? What if you're losing the support of your population altogether, or the government fails and cannot govern the territory, as in the case of Afghanistan, for example? And so then we can talk about a failed state. There is this tool that is linked over here, the Fragile State Index, which is very interesting to look through. Later on in the semester, we will play with it a little bit more and try to understand exactly what it means when we have failed states. But for now, you are welcome to just take a look. And so what we've done here is to review this idea of the nation state and what are the ingredients of a nation state. Now, nation states are still one of the most important, and some people will say still the most important actors in international politics, but we have others that are entering this field, such as international organizations and transnational networks that are all become more and more important. This little review should help you as you prepare to complete assignment 1 that is also posted in week 3.